Hello, hello. How's everybody doing tonight? Hopefully, all doing well. Tonight, we're going to working on the library chair. Which is a couple to a step stool, typically referred to as a library chair for office libraries and things for that step stool feature, but it can be used anywhere really. And so on that, and get the components laid out, but we're going to look at design options and things that we can do to customize it, change it up, and do all kinds of things. Nice little chair to around the house, shop, whatever the case may be, and hopefully you guys will pick something up off of that. Now, next week, earlier was a week or so ago, I asked a question in the Facebook group, and what pictures. So we're going to start covering some of those topics, some very simple how-tos and things like that, and get back into some of the finer points of Vectric. Get into some other things, laser setup, working with acrylics and fourth axis and all. So we'll start getting those classes going and developed and all. But I've been trying a couple of classes to do project-based items, and in this case, a very little chair. So, with that being said, hello all. James, hi bud. Chuck, Joe, Larry, aloha Larry. Everybody. All right. Let's kind of move over to and about the main component of this is I'm going to go into that and talk about some options, some customizing options. The parts. Then we can look at customizing this in all kinds of ways. So are you guys getting choppy audio? Is that what you're saying? Is everybody getting choppy audio? Let me know. All right. All right, let's see if we can adjust the audio a bit. It might be from the buffering. There might be some buffering going on. Stand by a minute. Let me see if I can work on that. Okay, let me know if this makes any difference. Let me know if you are getting any if it's any different, better, things like that, and we'll try to pick up from there. Okay. All right, good. just keep me posted if everything starts chopping up or what have you. There may be some buffering. In all, I haven't gotten all my settings 100% down since rebuilding the computer. So just keep me in the chat room. Just keep me abreast if it starts chopping up again, and we'll see what we can do on that. All right. So let's go ahead and move over to the SketchUp program to begin with. And we'll see what we can go from here. So basically, the chair itself right now is in its raw state as far as the general design. And the areas here that are cut out on the front part of the chair, I just threw those in working off of the basic design that you might see online, or for these type of chair samples and all. And generally these two cutouts, they would be basically mirrored on the backside part and all. But I didn't want to mirror them or put them on the backside part because I want to be able to show you how we can do some customization up on these sides and things. Now the major parts are, let's go ahead and let's see if I can hide this part for a moment. So we have our the front of our chair basically when it's in chair format, or the lower part of the ladder when it's in the ladder format. And this part consists of really 5 main parts. You've got your 2 sides, you've got your step, you've got a stretcher across the back, and then you have the upper step or the top piece. Now, depending on what designs get cut into the sides and things, down here in the bottom you'll notice these 2 strips running along the bottom side. These are to reinforce. They're 1/4 inch deep by 3/4 inch splines basically, and they're glued in so that this short grain area here, for this lower part, this short grain area here is kind of reinforced, because if this chair were to break or fracture or anything, it's going to be around this area. So these splines are there to reinforce that area. And so they, I would, whatever you guys decide to do, if you ever make, different versions in all these chairs, these splines, now I have them a different color in the picture just to identify them, but generally they would be, cut of the same board, same wood and everything. So therefore you wouldn't see them too much. Now the grain direction is going to change. Your vertical grain on your sides versus the horizontal grain of the splines and things. But other than that, they'd pretty much blend in very well, and they'd be very well hidden. But they're simply there for reinforcement and all. Now on the step, we have 2 slots cut into the side for that lower step, and these generally would not be squared off in the end. When that router comes, it's going to create radiuses and everything, and I don't have the radiuses drawn into the design. They will be drawn in. We're going to draw those in the Vectric and all. But our step that we put in, they would, let's see if I can unhide that last one. We would take our step material and we would round it off as well, round off the edges. Whether we do that with, sanding or whatever, we would just take off and create a radius on the top and lower edge so it fits into this area well here. Another thing we could do is some kind of dog bone fillet in the corners in the upper and lower corner, so we could have a square back without having to worry about rounding off the step, either one. but we have the general shapes. Now the back side is basically almost the same shape as the front side. The back side is shorter. The front side has a length of 16 and 3/4 or 16 inches. Sorry, length of 16 inches by 10 and 3/4 inches wide at the widest part. And the back one is got a length of 15 and 3/4 because if you notice, there's a 3/4 inch board on the bottom side, which when rotated creates the upper step. So the back side is, 3/4 of an inch shorter. And then from there, it comes up. And from the top side here to the top of the chair, we have 17 and a half inches. So to the very top of the chair, back arms, all the way down to the flat here on the back side is 17 and a half inches. And so this, I just did a simple curve design and everything, but that can be, whatever design you wanted. I mean, you could really customize it any way that you wanted to. You could have a straight back. You could have, I have just a little bit of a curvature there, whatever it may be. Now the back side also, if I get rid of my front here, let me see if I can get rid of my front components. Bear with me a second while I select those, and let me hide them. So the back side also has a step, basically a support, but it converts into a step when it's in the ladder mode. And then it has, the top of the chair, and then of course the back of the chair. Now all of this construction, other than the dados that are cut into the sides for the steps, they would also be reinforced not only with glue, but also there would be 2 screws on each side, 2 screws coming into the, see if I can bring this down a little bit. 2 screws coming in to the sides of the chair, and those screws would be countersunk, and then you would use some type of plugs, with matching grain or matching wood to, cover and hide those screws for the assembly. So it's a very simple assembly. No mortise and tenon and things. It's just very simple, glue and screw. Now this back side is flat, so it could be customized with all kinds of things, and we're going to look at that when we get into the Vectric. It could have someone's name on there. It could have some kind of ornate design. It could have, a heart, whatever, you wanted to put in this back design. You could customize it with a sports logo, whatever you wanted to do for yourself. And then if we unhide all of this, when this component is rotated, let's see if I can rotate it 180 degrees. When it's rotated, a lot of people on the design use a piano hinge here on these 2 parts for the hinge mechanism. I'm not a big fan of the piano hinge because the piano hinge itself, actually, when it's in chair mode, it kind of sticks up above the seat of the chair. It makes it very uncomfortable to sit on. So what I'm going to recommend is concealed hinges. A concealed hinge would be, let's see if I can pull up a concealed hinge. And I'm going to go to Rockler for this, rockler.com, and pull up one of their concealed hinges. Their SOSS or SOS brand concealed hinges. And let's see if I can pull this over into the main window for a minute. And see if I pull it up. We don't want the mini hinge. We want the full size concealed hinge. And the concealed hinge, when it closes on itself, it's completely, hidden. You can't even see the hinge until it's, ultimately opened up into, you know, ladder mode, then of course you see the hinge, as you see, like it's open right now in this image here. You know, these concealed hinges, they're relatively inexpensive. We would want the 4 5/8 by 1 3/8 hinge, they would, I think that's the one we would want. Yeah, I think that's the one we want. They're around $45 each. They're not cheap. But I haven't checked. I haven't sourced these out at different locations. I haven't sourced them out. Like, if I don't know if Lowe's in the hardware section sells concealed hinges of some sort, of some fashion and everything, or you know, there's all kinds of places like MLCS.com, MLCSwoodworking.com. You've got Woodcraft, Rocklers. A lot of you guys and girls have those in your areas. My local Rockler store is an hour and a half away from me, so I generally order online and things. But anywhere you can basically find a concealed hinge is a nice way to go. But I mean, you can also, you know, you can go with the piano hinge method as well. I think the piano hinge is bulky and ugly. It screws right to the face of these, and when the part, you know, is closed, you've got the round part of the hinge, the actual where all the links are, you know, together with the straight rod. It's kind of sticking up above the surface, and it would make for a very uncomfortable chair to sit into. The concealed hinges, if I can get into this part here, and bear with me a second. Let's take these 4 here and move. Hold down the control key and drag that over. Might as well drag one down here and one over here. And on these, a very simple mortise or chiseled area would be pulled out. Let's see if I can get into this lower part here. Bear with me a second. Let me see if I can draw this out now that I'm inside this part. And so you would have 2 mortises where that concealed hinge, you know, mounts into. They're not very deep. I think it's only like a 1/4 inch deep or something like that. And they wouldn't be square. They would have rounded, just like you saw in that picture of the hinge from, you know, and you would just mark them out. Now, those won't be done on the CNC. You would have to chisel or use a router table or something, because unfortunately we can't stand the boards up on edge to mill those mortises in and all. For that. Now, if we did do them on a CNC, then they would not be hidden. You know, you'd be able to see the, you know, we could cut from the edge, you know, and pocket down, but I don't recommend that, because then when it's folded into chair mode, now you have these little square holes in the top of the chair where you can see. So I recommend just hidden. That's why they're called concealed hinges and all. And you can source them anywhere relatively inexpensively. Now, the Rockler, their concealed hinges, you know, like I said, $45 each. But I'm sure there's other places that might be a little less expensive and everything. But that's what they're called, concealed hinges and all. And they make for a nice, you know, a nice hinge for when this part is, you know, closing and everything, and you know, for the chair. All right, so, and basically, you know, that's all there is to the components of the chair. Now, the lower step here, or which would be the upper step when it's in ladder mode, but the lower support going across the top, that's just, again, 4 screws, 2 on each side. They would be countersunk, and then they could be filled with plugs. When the assembly is complete, when that step is on there, these 2 parts are nice and flat on the floor, and everything is nice and even. So again, the front side here is 16 inches tall by 10 3/4 inches wide. Now this angle is important. This angle cut of the 2 parts, it's 20 degrees or 70 degrees, however you want to look at it, but it's a 70-degree angle. And the lower part at the width here is 4 1/4 inches wide. So basically this is the general layout of the chair. And now that we have the skeleton, which I'm providing all the files, DXFs and everything to you for the skeleton, now we can take and go into the Vectric software, and we can look at those parts laid out and all, and now we could really just come in and just start customizing and changing up anything that we want. Now it's important that if we are going to do some kind of cut through, let's explode these parts out, ungroup them, should I say, not explode. Let's get into my panel 1 here, and let's ungroup these. U for ungroup, G for group, so we're going to hit U to ungroup them. But these areas here, they don't have to be there. They could be anything. We could do all kind of ornate designs, and I'm going to bring in a couple of designs and just show you. But even the bottom of the chair here in this area, let's see if I can let me get rid of some duplicates. Bear with me a second. Let me go into node editing mode. And let me cut the node here and cut this node down here so I can separate these 2 parts. But, this design here, I just have a very simple curve for the lower part of the chair. But again, that could be something that, whatever, it could be customized any way you want. It could be just flat and square across the bottom. I don't recommend having it flat and square across the bottom. I think the chair should sit on 2 points, should land on 2 points versus across the surface, because you have a lot of options. If you have a straight board coming across, or straight, bottom coming across, well, if you're on an uneven floor of some sort, then you're going to get rocking and things. Having some kind of relief material removed from this area gives us 2 contact points on the floor for the front and the front or the bottom, whenever it's in ladder mode, however you want to say it. That gives us a little bit more of a stable foundation. Now that vector here for the 1/4 inch deep, 3/4 inch wide spline, that's kind of important. I don't know if I would make this without it. I don't think I would make it without it, because the area in here, if I can draw kind of a circle, the area within here is short grain, meaning there's not a whole lot there. It's running in a vertical pattern, and it's very, very susceptible to if any part of this chair is going to be a weak point, this area in here is going to be the weakest point of anything, and the last thing you want is the chair to break under somebody or something. So this 1/4 inch deep, 3/4 inch wide spline is a good way of reinforcing that area. So that I would kind of, no matter what you customize this chair out to be, and the carvings and the cut throughs, whatever it is, the look. In some way or another, this particular spline in here needs to be within the design. And again, it's going to be the same type of material. It's just the grain direction is going to be running a little bit different direction grain versus, we got a horizontal grain here and a vertical a vertical grain when it's standing up, of course, and then a horizontal grain for the spline. So you will see that, but it's on the inside of the part, so it's not very visible, but I would include that in. Now, of course, our next vector up here, we have where the step, the recess for the step is, and the this is the part that's going to get either dog bone filleted, and when I say dog bone filleted, I'm referring to if we go to our fillet tool under edit objects, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill to cut this so I have an 1/8 inch radius. Oops, not T-bone, dog bone, unless we want a dog bone fillet. We can throw a dog bone fillet in here, and let me reference this. That gives some place for our shelf when it comes in. It gives a nice place for the corners to go, but also gave a place for our bit to escape without creating radiuses. Now, if we just simply went into a radiused corner, if I come in here and let's do a fillet with just a normal radius on these two parts. Well, as you can see, now our shelf, when it goes in, we got to have some place for those corners to go, so we would end up rounding those corners off on the actual shelf board, creating an 1/8 inch radius so it fits within this pocket that's getting cut out. It's kind of 6 in one, half dozen the other how you would handle that on the design. I would generally, since it's not going to be too visible, I would probably do a dog bone fillet if I was cutting this on the CNC, and that way I don't have to screw around with rounding off the corners of my shelf board, and trying to get those corners to be somewhat of a match to those radiuses and things. Of course, I could just run an 1/8 inch roundover bit right on it to round those off. Those two edges off on the back side and everything. But most likely for me, I would end up, let me get my shelf back up in place where it belongs. I would end up dog bone filleting it. That way I can just throw my square shelf board in there, because my shelf board is going to have a 70 degree or 20 degree, however you want to look at it, angle cut on the front, so it's flush with the front of the piece and everything. But that shelf vector, that's got that's an important part of the structure and the use of the ladder. That's one of the steps. So whatever we change these two designs to, if we did some kind of ornate carving where it's not carved through, where it's not a through hole, or if we stuck with kind of just a basic design like you see here, these two vectors would get profile cut all the way through. They're going to be separated, so we wouldn't be able to do one long design because we have a shelf pocket in here. Now, if I were cutting this on the back side, if we pop back over to the Vetric here, if I were cutting on the back side, well, that shelf groove is only a 1/4 inch deep, on where that dado is only a 1/4 inch deep. So I have a 1/2 inch of material here. If I was doing some type of 3D carving, some kind of where I had heck, I could even make it to where, if I was really creative, I could make it to where this whole side here was some sort of 3D carving, and then with not going any deeper than a 1/2 inch, so it'd be a very shallow 3D carving. But if I was slick enough to where when this was in ladder mode, that it would be some kind of design that made sense when it's in ladder mode too, some kind of ornate pattern or whatever that when it's flipped up, that it actually kind of somewhat flows together. Or it could not, because it's separated by these two, the seat top and everything, and the shelf top and all. However you could do. So you could do a nice 3D ornate carving here. You could do a nice carving up the side panels and stuff, and just really just deck this chair out. have a nice across the back, have some kind of nice carving, three-dimensional carving there. It could be some kind of wildlife scene if this was going to be kind of a country home type carving, and whatever it may be. Or you could do some very just simple basic cut through like I have here. So just some basic shape, and of course we would match those on the back side. So we would basically take these two shapes here, and we would if I copy and paste them, they're going to land on top of each other. From there, I could go ahead and mirror them, flipping them horizontally. And then I could take, actually I didn't need to mirror them. Let's undo the mirror. Bear with me a second. But I could take and move them over. And I need to mirror them vertically. Flip them this way. There we go. And, get them into somewhat of a position. And I could, match the design, whatever it may be, on the front side. I could have it look, however I want. Now, notice that when I mirror this, that we have an angle difference here. There's a slight angle coming from, the width between the top right side of this selected vector and the basically what would be the seat area of the chair. It's wider here at the top than at the bottom. I would personally, go into and rotate that out so that it's pretty well parallel with one another, and then position it and all. But we could do something like that for a very basic design if we just wanted to knock out a bunch of these basic chairs to sell or what have you. But also we have the ability to customize as well. And so let's see if I can get back to our basic setup. So the panels, this can be cut out of a 1x12. I do have the panels. They are 40 inches in length. So my setup here on the Vectric software, I do have a setup of, actually 37 inches in length, not 40, 37 inches in length by 12 inches. Now I know a 1x12 is only 11 1/4 inches wide. If I did some rotating and everything with these parts, I can get I can get it out of a 1x12 if I did a little bit of moving around and rotation of the parts and all. But I would generally, because I would make this out of something nice looking, mahogany or walnut or maple or cherry or whatever the case may be. Maybe a combination of like a cherry ladder with walnut steps and stuff, or mahogany, whatever the case may be. And then, but that would require me to glue up my panels and then cut them down to finished size. And so if I was gluing up my panels, then I'm gonna have two 6-inch pieces, or 6.5, and then cut it down and square it up on the table saw or what have you. So I would end up with a finished part of 12 inches wide. But if I'm going to cut it right out of the store bought 1x12, then I got to realize that I only have 11 1/4 inches of nominal lumber size to work with and all. So I would be gluing up my panels. Now, if we look, you can see that I have the layers laid out to panel 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 panels. And these panels, again, are 12 by 37 inches in length. Now, if we look at panel 1 and panel 2, they're essentially the same parts, right? So it's our main body of our chair / ladder. So we definitely need 2 panels for sure to cut out this main part. Now when we get into panels 3, 4, and 5, well, these are the steps. And so we have our back stretcher, which is this part here. We've got our back of our chair. And of course, I just went with this basic shape. This back of the chair could be any shape, any design, any any way you want. The only thing that's crucial, of course, is the size. So we need a back panel or back portion that has at least 13 inches wide. I don't know why it came up 12.99494, but 13 inches wide. Let's see if I can. Am I snapping to my point? Yeah, but it's 13. I don't know why it's coming out 12.9494. I must have this broken down into too many decimals. It's 13 inches with a height of, and the height really could be any size, but I went with a height of 6.5 inches tall, and so I've got this broken down to 4 decimals, so that's why it's popping up. But 6.5 by 13, and of course that could be any shape, any way that you want. Our screws, when we are screwing in through the sides and everything, our screws are coming in from the. Let's see if I can get into panel 3 here and turn panel 1 back off. Let's turn those dimensions off. We don't need them anymore. Our screws are coming in through the side and into the chair. So we've got 4 screws in each side, and coming through these parts here. So whatever your design is, just make sure your length of screws that you have that you're screwing into, and they're going to be countersunk out of the chair side, because imagine that we have the chair part here that it's getting screwed into. Just keep in mind that the screws are going to be countersunk below the surface, and then we would end up plugging those holes up, to conceal the screw heads and all. They're going to be countersunk in there. So whatever you decide on the back of the chair, the design, you can really get creative with this and do all kinds of neat things. Hell, it could be, you ever seen those Adirondack chairs where they have the Punisher back? It could be really anything, any shape and all. But I just went with a general basic shape for the skeleton for you guys and girls. But it's going to be screwed in, on the sides, and then those will be countersunk and then plugged up. Same thing with the stretcher. There's going to be 2 screws on each side going into the stretcher on the back lower side. But other than those 2 parts, and let's get rid of these screws here and all. But other than those 2 parts, the rest of them are the shelf and the seat piece. Those are just square pieces that can be cut out of one board. And the widest part of all the shelves for panel 3, let's get centered back up here. For panel 3, panel 4, and panel 5, of those square, parts that can be cut out of a single board, the widest one is the back, chair top, and that has a size of 15 inches in length by 8.5 inches in width. So it could be cut out of a 1x10, but all of these parts could be cut out of just one long board cut down. It doesn't have to be 12 inches wide, is what I'm saying, for those parts. Any of these parts, they could be cut out of a 1x10, or something. You may be, no, you won't be able to get a 1x8, because a 1x8 is 8.25 as well, or 7.25 for a 1x8. So 1x10. But they could all be cut out, and hell, they could be, other than these 2 parts, other than the stretcher and the back of the chair, because they do have some ornate curves to them and all. The rest of the pieces for these half here, and then panel 4 and panel 5, those remaining parts, they don't need to be out of a 37-inch long, 12-inch wide board. They can be cut out of a smaller board of the same material, so you can have, or even a contrasting, because they're the steps. They could be a contrasting material. I think when I make mine, it's going to be a contrasting material. I'm going to probably go with a cherry walnut combination or a mahogany walnut combination or something really nice looking. But those parts, they don't need to be cut on the CNC. They can be cut on a table saw or with a skill saw. Heck, they could be even cut with a scroll saw. Not a scroll saw, jigsaw, but you want to ensure that they're pretty much square and everything. So if you have access to a table saw or a miter saw, of some sort, or a skill saw, great. You don't have to have a lot of fancy tools or spend a lot of money, on machinery and tools. They can be done with very simple hand tools. Hell, if you're a hand tool guy, you could use a hand saw. I'm not a hand tool guy. I'm not going to cut with a hand saw. I'm going to use a chop saw, miter saw, table saw, whatever we could do. However it may be. But the parts we're going to focus on today are going to be basically panels 1 and panel 2. These side areas here and all. And we're going to, and as well as panel 3, the back. Let's start with the back as far as what we could do. So let's imagine that we're gonna do a nice V carving. Maybe we'll put some decorative design here of some sort. Let's see what I've got as far as importing and tracing an image or something. So let's go to my downloads folder and let's see what I've got to work with. So if this is kind of a heart's not necessarily feminine, but let's look at this for a moment. Let's import this image and let's zoom into it and let's see if we can trace it out. So open up our trace bitmap tool. Let's turn the fading off so we can actually see the image. Let's see what we can come up with right about there. Preview that, click apply and close that tool, and then we can get rid of that bitmap. Now we can take and let's move this part over to our seat back and let's get it sized up. Oops, not that big. And then I want to go ahead and center it. So if I hold down my shift key and select on that seat back, I can use my alignment tool now and align to the selection being the chair back that I selected last. And I can get that centered up on there nicely. And this could be from here could be a V carving. So if we went over and looked at this part V carved, let's V carve this piece out. 60-degree V-bit would be what I use. Calculate that. There is one open vector somewhere, and that's fine. We'll go ahead and ignore it for the time being. Then we'll go in and we'll locate it and get rid of it. Most likely it's a little line or something somewhere. And then let's come over here and let's cut this chair back out. So that would be a profile cut. Cutting 3/4 of an inch thick on the material. I'm using a 1/4 inch end mill. I will be cutting on the outside of the line, and we'll go ahead and I'm not going to add tabs, so that way I can get rid of the rest of the board and we can look at this chair back. But I would add a few tabs here and there for sure to hold that part in, but we're not going to add tabs for the time being. And let's preview those two toolpaths. And so we could, do some type of, you guys get the idea, we could do some type of decorative carving. I probably would dress this up a little bit more. That looks a little plain. I'd probably have some kind of border or something outlining this. Maybe a nice little V-carve border going around, just something, because right now just having this carving right in the middle of the chair back, that doesn't do a whole lot for me. It's a little basic, a little plain. So let's go in and let's look at a different option. Let's kind of get rid of that, and let's see what else I've got here. Let's do a cut through of sorts, maybe where it's like cut all the way through. Let's see what I've got for a cut through pattern that would fit within that area. Here's a decent one. Let's bring that in. Let me zoom into it. We'll go ahead and trace this out. Turn the fading off on that bitmap tracing. We can get rid of that heart in the background. Turn the fading off so we can see our, design. And let's see what we come up with. I'm going to go probably about 80% on the black and white fill area and preview that. Apply and close. Now I'm going to turn that bitmap layer off. And now it comes down to deciding which of the two patterns. I'm going to go with the lower pattern, so I'm going to go ahead and ungroup these guys and get rid of this upper portion. I could make it one whole piece, but we'll leave it at that. But on here, I wouldn't want, because I need to create some kind of separation of this part. If I'm going to cut it out, because I have floating parts of wood here that that would just fall out. You know what I mean? They would fall out. And so what I'd want to do is kind of do some vector cutting. Let's get this up to a size. Let's get this sized up and on our board. So I'm going to actually hold down the shift key. Select my background, go into the alignment tool, center that up using the align to selection, and now I can come in here and size this up. Something like that. Oops. Let me undo that real quick. Let me group these parts together. When you're centering, make sure you group it together, because they're going to kind of get jumbled if you don't, like they did just a moment ago. So let's do that one more time now that it's grouped. Align to center. There we go. And now we can size this up. Hold down your shift key, keep it centered, and then we can kind of size this up. And you can kind of see, a nice little carving that would be cut out of the back of the chair. Now, the holes and all will be fine. Right here is where we're going to start. So what I would do is I would start on this lower part. Let's go into node editing, and let's get this, ungroup it so we can work with it. Let's go into node editing, and let's get this vector here cut, and on this straight edge here, this vector here, let's get that cut out, and that will separate this part, this upper part here. So let's get back into normal selection mode. That will separate that part. So what I can do now is select all of this lower area and just move it down just a little bit, kind of to create that separation. And now I can use my extend tool here to extend this to close off that up. So now I have that separation, so that part would get cut out. Now here, I'm going, if I were to close this up, I need to get rid of that little hook right there if I was going to close this up. So let's go back into node editing. Node editing, and let's take and delete that point. Let's turn this point back around. What I'm trying to do is rebuild this shape a little bit. And then we'll join that or close it off with some type of smooth curve. That's the under edit objects, join or close with a smooth curve, third icon, bottom row. And then we can kind of pull that up and just get that shape somewhat decent. And now, if I'm cutting this out and everything, I've got to really take into consideration of all these floating parts. So this part in here would be, if I were to carve this out and through, this part here would be floating in there. And of course it wouldn't float without some type of bridge or something, to combine it together. So let's take a close look at this and let's see what we would do here. So I want to cut this part out for sure. So let's go ahead and let's separate that. Let's go into node editing. We're going to select this part, and I'm going to cut the vector here. And down here on this corner, cut it. And while I'm at it, I'll do the same thing right across here. We'll cut the vector there and up here on this corner. And while I'm at it here, I'll cut the vector on this corner here and then down here. Now what that will allow me to do is to take these vectors, and I'm going to, for right now, let's go back into node editing and let's delete that point and turn this into a Bezier curve, so I can kind of get a little bit of a curve going back there, somewhat of a curve there. But the whole point of this is I want to join from, and I'll use a nice little arc tool. I'll click and snap there and then snap down here on this corner, pull a small arc following that curve, and now I can select this along with that, and notice that I've got something else going on down here. It's coming all the way around, and so let's find out where that's going to. Alright, so down here I need to separate that, so let's do that real quick. Let's go back into node editing mode and node editing, cut this corner, right about there. Alright, that should be the only two areas that I need to cut. It is. So now I can come in, and once again I'll just take my arc tool and come from here to here, zoom in a little bit so I can just get a very subtle arc to kind of match the flow of the curve. And now with that arc selected, if I close my arc tool, with that arc selected, with the upper arc selected and this vector selected, I can now come over to my 1, 2, 3, all those. I can come over to my join tool, and I should have 4 open vectors selected that after joining will have 1 closed vector. So now I've got this part, and so I can take that and I want to grab the 3 circles as well, this circle here, here, and here, 4 circles, and I'm just going to use my arrow keys and bump that over a little bit, very slightly. It's going to alter the design also slightly, and I can repeat that process over here. So let's do that one more time. With that selected, let's go into node editing, click on this corner, cut the vector. Might as well do this corner while I'm here, cut the vector, and if I zoom in, let's grab this one and cut the vector there. This lower side, we'll cut the vector on this corner and this corner. And over here on this vector, I'm going to kind of find the straightaway right down here, and I'll cut it down there. So let's come all the way down to the bottom now, and once again we're going to cut this bottom corner, this corner, cut the vector, and same thing here, cut on this upper corner here and here, and that should be, yep, that's the only ones I need to cut. While I'm here in node editing mode, I'm going to grab this corner and cut it, this corner over here and cut it, and then do the same thing on the lower side, cut those 2. Now on this side here, I got to come back to this straight point here. I don't want to cut it, up here somewhere, so I'll just come back to this point and cut it right there. because eventually I'm going to end up joining all of these straightaways together. So now that we have those cut, we can come in and select our main vector. We can, select this guy here, and we could use the tool join with a smooth curve if we wanted to, rather than drawing our arc ourselves. We could join with a smooth curve, which it did down here. So we got to do it one more time. Join with a smooth curve to join that upper part, and it'll create the curve for us. But down here, when it created the curve, it made it a little bit wonky. That's a technical term, wonky. And so what I would do is I'd come into node editing, and I'd end up pulling this one back a little bit. And instead of making it so straight and rigid, I would smooth that point. It basically turns it into a Bezier curve. So that way I can kind of smooth it out, that transition a little bit. And so now that I've closed off that vector, I'm going to grab my circles, because they're kind of, they kind of go hand in hand with this side. And I bumped over 2 spaces on the left, so on the right, 1, 2, bump that over as well. Now I could have easily taken and mirrored this part, just mirrored it left to right if I wanted to, but I've already got it here, so why do that? Now, from here, I've got some space, and now I can focus on kind of the middle area. So imagine these getting cut all the way through. We're going to have this shape cut all the way out and everything in our chair on these both sides. Well, now we have this middle area. Now I can carve out these areas here as well, these two here, and if I join or close this off, then now I've got this floating part right here in the middle that is going to get cut out also, but I've got this floating part, which would be this area right here. Let me hold the shift key and select both these, this, and this. I've got this area here that would just be kind of free floating, and it would fall out, and all. Now, me personally, I want this part to be cut out because I want this part of the wood. I think that would look better with this part of the wood remaining, and so I want to separate, and I'm going to go ahead and do that by coming down here and go into node editing mode, and I'm going to cut this corner here, cut this corner over here. Down on the lower side, I'm going to find my corner, cut it, and here as well. Now I can go ahead and let's look at these 2 areas here in the middle, this piece and this piece. I want to join with a smooth curve once and twice, and that will finish that off. And so that part is going to be a profile cut, cutting that part out, and everything. Now all of this is going to be wood, so I want to eliminate these parts here. I want to go ahead and get rid of them. I don't need that that joining, that combination. I'm going to get rid of those, as well as these extensions here. Oh, not that whole part. Let's go into node editing and cut those 2 corners. So right here, cut the vector, and right here we'll cut the vector. And that way I can eliminate that part and that part. Now I've got a little bit of a jog coming out this way, and also I don't want it to kind of curve back in. So what I'm going to do is I'll go back into node editing, and I'm going to basically straighten this out and just pull this over ever so slightly. Straighten this back out. And I'm pulling the anchor, this control point here. I'm pulling that to kind of get that curve to point back in that general direction. And so now I can take and come in here and this vector and this vector here and join with a smooth curve to close it off. Select this vector now and add that to it, join with a smooth curve. Oops, it joined up there. Let's undo that. Let's do this in a little bit of an order. Let's take and grab this one up here with that lower one and join with a smooth curve, because it's wanting to pull that line. It's wanting to come around in this order. Now I can add this line into the mix and join with a smooth curve once, and then again twice at the bottom. And if I wanted to, while I'm here, go into node editing, and let's smooth, let's delete that point there and smooth this point out a little bit, and just get that, you know, to curve a little bit, get rid of that hump. Same thing on this side. I'm going to delete this point right here, and then I'm going to pull this anchor, this control point out, and just kind of smooth it out somewhat there. So now I have I'm getting closer to the design that's going to be cut out of the back of the chair. I've got all this solid wood meat here that's going to be here and everything, so that's going to be good for me. Let's match up and do this side here. Let's make sure all of our vectors are cut. They are. So if I grab this lower vector and hold down my shift key and grab this one on the right and join with a smooth curve, notice how it wanted to join. Notice how it went from right to left and it joined over there. So I'm going to undo that, and now that I know that it wants to go in that direction, I'm just going to grab this one on the right hand side and I'll join that so it'll pull there, and then come right around and join with a smooth curve. Add in this vector, join with a smooth curve, and then one more time to finish it off. And if there was any adjustment or anything I needed to make in the curve, I could. But for right now, that looks good. And now I've got, you know, these vectors to contend with. And again, I'm going to delete the ones on the right hand side. If I wanted to put some kind of little rectangle pocket cutout or something there to make it look like they were connected together, I could. But I really don't want to. I want it to be, you know, I want this nice solid reinforced wood right here. So now that leaves me with just this upper part right here and how I want to contend with it. So what I think I'm going to do is I want this ribbon effect, in a sense, you know, how it is. But I've got these two islands, or three islands, should I say, here, here, and here. So how would I deal with that? Let's go in first of all and let's kind of trim up some things. Let's go into node editing mode, and let's come right about back here, and I'm on the line, so I'm going to just insert a point, or actually cut the vector, which will do the same thing for me because I want to cut the vector, and then right straight across I'm going to do the same thing. Select this vector and just cut it right there. What that will allow me to do is to delete these two, and then I can come in here and here and join with a straight line, just kind of close it off. I'd probably, yeah, with a straight line would be fine. Same thing over here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this right down the middle and mirror it. That way everything is nice and even. So I'm going to take a straight line, and I'm going to find my center point here and just shoot right through that. And now I can take my interactive trim tool, my scissors, and I can go ahead and get rid of these parts here. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. That. And I want to go into node editing mode, and I want to delete this span right here. A span is a between two control points, also known as nodes. The line between those two nodes is the span, so I can click delete span to get rid of it. So now that I have essentially this right half, I don't need this teardrop either, I can select this left side, and I can come in and mirror that. I can create a mirror copy, and I can just flip it to the right to create that mirrored part. Now, before I join these two halves together, I really got to think about this cut here, and I'm thinking that I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that I'm going to bridge. Oh goodness, let's see here. If I bridge that together, open it up a little bit, bridge that. I'm trying to think about how I can keep these two parts floating in there, or those two pieces of wood, but have some solid wood in there, but still look decent. Hell, it might look decent if I got rid of them, but not sure. So let's see what we can do here. Let's go into node editing on this one, and I'm going to cut the vector here. This way I can pull, and separate these two lines a little bit. And I don't want to pull them too much. I still want that teardrop, but if I join that, Thinking. Bear with me a second. Let's see here. If this comes up into that teardrop, all right, I am going to keep that still cut and separated, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to join this. I'm just going to create and draw my little bridges in there. So let's do some node cutting and all. I think I can. If that is cut out and this runs across here. Okay, let's see. Maybe join at the top of the curve, not at the point. At the top of the curve, not at the point. That would, that would probably be a good suggestion. Maybe joining up here. And I'm trying to create it to where it doesn't look so gaudy. Let's see here. I'm just going to go with a, let's grab, from here to here. And from here to here. No, that's too wide. Bear with me a second. Let's go from here to here and from here to here. And if I trim, I could do that. And yeah, and so let's do the same thing here, which that doesn't look too bad, and it gives me enough meat here for wood. That actually doesn't look too bad. So let's take and draw a line from here to here, and that's all I need because this is mirrored, remember? So I'm going to take one more time and I'm going to grab this right side and oops, not my vector there. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to come in and I'm going to trim this and cut that vector there. So that way I can get rid of that. And now I should, by doing that, I should be able to mirror this side. So we go into mirror, create a mirror copy and flip to the right. And that should give me what I miss. Oh, bear with me. I forgot to cut. Let's go into node editing. I can just do that here in node editing. I'm actually going to come back here and cut the vector there. Pick somewhere right about here. and cut the vector on that point, so that way I can get rid of those two. And this should, if I join with a straight line and join with a straight line, that should give me that part there. Now I can take both of my parts. It doesn't look too bad with those openings up there, those bridges. So now I could take and join all of those together. Now notice how it says I have 2 open vectors selected, but after joining I'll have 1 open vector. So I'll go ahead and do that, but that still means that this vector is open somewhere, and where it's going to be open is right here at the bottom. And so I'll go ahead and join with a smooth curve to close that off, and let's kind of get that curve pulled down a little bit. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and do our profile cut. This is going to most likely require about a 1/16 inch end mill. I could even do a V-carve too, so it gives a nice little chamfer inward. But let's do the V-carve cut, or the profile cut. Now my end mill is not going to go all the way to the end of this part here. I could use my tapered ball nose end mill, my 32nd or something, which can really get into tight areas and it can get deep. I can cut through my 3/4 inch material with it. I might be able to use that. But let's look at what my 1/8 inch end mill will do and how far it's going to get me. So let's create our profile toolpath for this. And you just know, you got to know that it's only going to carve up to where the bit can fit. It's only going to create the toolpath. And I want to be on the inside of the cuts for these. I want to be on the inside of the cuts for those. But it's only going to cut, it's only going to create a toolpath. Notice how right here, that's all it created. You see that blue? So it didn't create any of the toolpath, simply for the fact that my end mill can't fit. And let's find out why. Let's see how wide everything is and stuff. Let's grab our measure tool. Now I'm going to use just this measure tool in the distance up here in the top left corner, measure between 2 points. It's going to give me a read off here. It's not going to put any measurements on my board. So 0.1429. Well, my 1/8 inch end mill should fit through there. Did I not have what I have for the bit? Oh, I'm an idiot. I didn't put the 1/8 inch. I put my 1/4 inch in there. All right, I was like, wait a minute, that 1/8 inch should fit there. All right, 1/8 inch end mill. Let's click OK and let's calculate that toolpath. So for the most part, it fit into a lot of the areas. Let's get this kind of pulled up and see. But there's still a lot of areas that it didn't fit. So let's preview the cut and let's see what we've got. Yeah, so very sporadic. It didn't fit anywhere there. So I'm going to change it up, and I'm actually going to, you guys have probably rarely ever seen me do this. I'm going to use my tapered ball nose bit for this, and because that tapered ball nose bit comes down to a very fine point. Now I do have my tool database. I lost all my tool settings and everything a couple weeks back when I lost my tools, so I do have to add a new bit in here for this. And so I'm going to create a new group and call this tapered ball nose. And within that group, I'll go ahead and drop it under the Imperial tool so it's all by itself. But I'm going to create a new tool, and we're going to go tapered ball nose. I'm going to use it's got a 1/4 inch shank on it. The side angle is going to be 6.2 degrees, and it's going to be. I'm going to use my. Do I want to use my 16th or my 32nd? I'll use my 16th inch tapered ball nose, so that'll have a radius of 0.03125. And the pass depth on this. Now the ball nose end mills, they're, generally 90% of the time, they're generally used for 3D finish cuts, but they're also end mills. They can remove massive amounts of material and everything, like a regular flat end mill. But we have an advantage with the sharp point to be able to get into those tight areas. But on my pass depth, I still don't want to be too aggressive with my, my end mill and everything. So I'm gonna, just an 1/8 inch pass depth on this. My step over for this could be around, I'll go 33, not 0.33, but 33.3%, a third of it. Spindle speed, if I was using a spindle or router on this, I'd probably be about 22.5. And as far as the feed rate, inches a minute, I'm going to go 50 inches a minute, and then a plunge rate of 20 should be fine. Now, if I was using my 32nd inch bit, then those numbers would be much, much different. So we'll go ahead and click OK on that to create that tool, and we've got it in there now. And so we'll calculate that tool path, and ball nose 0.75. Oh, are you going to be a pain in the butt because of the radius of the shank? It's going to be a pain in the butt because of the radius of the shank. So bear with me a moment. Patrick is thinking that because it's a 1/4 inch diameter shank that it can't fit, but it can. It can. Stand by a moment. We're going to trick the machine. If I had to divide this bit in half, if I had to reduce everything, because I want to be able to keep my angle. Let me think about this for 2 seconds. If I go with an 1/8 inch, that's not going to work. Oh, come on. Let me use my... Alright, instead of a profile cut, I may have to do this as a pocket toolpath with that bit. So let me set it up as a pocket cut, cutting 3/4 of an inch through. I'm going to use my tapered ball nose and calculate. Nope, it's not going to let me do that either. So now Vern is throwing out a suggestion saying go to one line in the center and V carve it. I mean, if I were to V carve this, I wouldn't have to go with the center line. If I were to V carve this and calculate the tool path, I could get to a very nice V carving. I'm wanting to cut all the way through. So if I did a single line and with a profile cut, I see what you're saying, Vern. Go with a single line and run a V bit, cut all the way through. But I don't know how that would look on the back side. I want a nice even. So here's how I'm going to get around that. We're going to take an offset. So I'm going to go offset outward. I'm going to offset it outward a 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to delete the original, select the new, and I'm going to go ahead and offset that. And you know, create that that cut there. Nope, can't do a 1/16 of an inch. Bear with me a second. Let's go offset 0.03125. Create sharp corners. There we go. Gonna have to go back in and create my separations, but by making it somewhat wider, let me test this theory out real quick before I go through and profile cut on the inside, calculate, oops, select the vector first, calculate, nah, still not getting there. Dadgummit. Undo that. Let's undo that. Let's get back where we were here. So Vern is suggesting a single line. When that's going to mean I have to draw a line all the way through this and V-carve. Oh, I don't want to have to do that. Oh, I don't want to have to do that. Hold on a second, guys and girls. This is one of those things where you run into these challenges and you got to figure out, you know, what's going to be the best course of action. Let's look at this in a different way. Let's see here. Offsetting it outward, I have to clean up some. All right, let's take and bring this up a little bit. Let's bring that up. Let's move that up a little bit there. Let's take this guy. We're going to separate him one. Oops. Let's grab our little Jerry's too. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. Grab this guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Grab this one. 1, 2, 3. And that should give me some space between all these parts. When I offset it outward, and yep, we'll have to do a little bit of cleanup. Offset outward, I'm going to go a full 1/16 of an inch. I want to delete the original. Okay. Get rid of those 2 points. They're not going to do me any good there. Balls are joined together. I've lost this part here, and I've lost my arrowheads. So let's see if we can oh, let's see. Well, that was stupid. I just drew that line. Okay, let's take and And with this line here, Alright, so it's altered the design a little bit, but it should have given me the ability now. Let's do some spacing here. 1, 2, 3. Alright, these guys, somehow or another, when they got offset, they got joined together. So let's go in and cut the vector here and here. Join with a smooth curve to close that one off. Join with a smooth curve to close that one off. And now I can move this one over. Alright, I'm going to delete these guys. And I'm going to draw a straight line right straight up in the middle of that V-shaped part here. And I'm going to go into the mirror tool. And with the mirror tool, I'm going to select these 4 here, and I'm going to select this line. And I'm going to tell it to flip that about the line. Create a mirror copy so it flips it and creates that equidistance. Now I can come in and remove my line. Alright, so let's see what we've got here as far as a profile cut goes. Let's go back to our 1/8 inch end mill and calculate that toolpath. Let's preview that cut. And let's see if I even, you know, what we got going on here. So if I remove that part, all of these floating pieces that are, you know, hanging in here. I don't know if I like it. I don't think I do. Let's see. It leaves something to be desired, right? So there would have to be some definite design change, you know, of some sort. I mean, it doesn't look too bad, but it's missing something. There's you know, some type of detail. But hopefully, you guys, that little walkthrough, even though it did not, you know, the end result doesn't look very hot. Hopefully the actual steps that we took to, you know, cut the vectors and rejoin them and separate things, hopefully that little exercise was helpful to you if you ever had to work with vectors. But I don't know. I don't know, you know, on the back of a chair, it would look okay, but what worries me is these thin parts here and here. Those are just kind of flapping. So this would require a whole little design change. So Again, when you're thinking about what's going to go in these blanks and everything, we really have to take that into consideration, and how things are cut. Let's see what we've got here. Nah. I thought I had, it's been hard trying to build files back up, but I thought I had some decent looking vectors to choose from for carved patterns and stuff in the sides of the chairs, to be cut out or V-carved. And as far as a V-carve or a 3D model design or something, carving in any of these, like in the side of the chair, this one with the leaves here and all, would look really nice and things to trace and all. But now in order to trace, and you could V-carve it out and all, but to order and trace and have that turn into a model, it would have to be in a spire in order to convert that. But any of these designs, I have them selected for a reason, because I think they would look nice in the side of the chair or even the back of the chair. Let's take and trace this out and see what we can see. So let me see which one's going to give me the... So I'm probably going to go about 50%. Right about there. And preview, apply, close, and get rid of that image. So now I have some various designs to work with, but I want to focus on this one here. Let's ungroup all this. Let me grab this design here and group it back together. Oops, ungroup. Got a couple of stragglers over here on the right side. Let's get those shut off. I don't want those in my selection. Alright, so nothing else. Selected, group that together, and we can pull that over. Now, more so than the back of the chair, this would look good on one of the sides in a sense, but let's go ahead and pull this up. And let's ungroup it, because I have some junk up here in the corner that I want to get rid of. And so let's get rid of these guys. We don't need them on there. And whenever you see these rectangles and everything, these here guys, these are pixels. Get rid of them. They're noise. They're pixels. Get rid of them. If you see the ones that look like rectangles, figure eights and all, they don't need to be in there. These figure eights, like this one here, and stuff, get rid of all those. And all I'm doing is going through and selecting and delete. Select, delete, select, delete. I do want to keep the ones that look like a little bit like a teardrop. I'll keep those in there, but all those rectangular ones I want to get rid of. We'll find a pattern that will look good. I'm trying to find a pattern so I can provide it to you guys if we find one that's appealing. But also I'm creating this. We gotta hurry up, and we gotta create our toolpaths for the actual parts to cut them out, because I want to be able to give this file to you guys, and you guys can customize it. You can go with the basic general design and just cut them out and knock them out, left and right. Or we can go through and you can customize them with your own, little decorations and what have you, and make some really nice looking library chairs. I'm just trying to give you the skeleton, to work off of. All right, I think for the most part, that's cleaned up enough. Now on this one, this would be a flat, there would be a flat depth because of the wide space between the leaves. I would V-carve this. As I said before, what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to create, instead of just such a plain back, I'm going to size this down just a little bit. Just a little bit. And as a matter of fact, you know what? We got enough room. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to move this over here. I'm going to find the center point of my chair back, which is right there. That is not the center point of my chair back. Vectric. Why are you calling that the center? That is not the center. Unless my eyes are deceiving me, that bad boy is not the center. So I'm going to find roughly my center point, which is here and here. There we go. And again, I'm going to mirror this along that line. I'm going to flip it about the line and create that pattern there. All right, get rid of that line. Now, with these, I'm going to size them down ever so little. Not a lot. But just enough. Just enough that I can take my border here and offset it inward about, I'm going to go 1/8 of an inch. And, oops, I went outward. 1/4 of an inch. I don't know why I said 1/8 of an inch. 1/4 of an inch inward. Let's go a little bit more. Let's go point 3. Let's try 0.3, Laney, not 3 inches. 0.3. Oh, so there we go. Because I want to create a little V-carve border. So let's start with that. Let's get rid of all of these toolpaths. I didn't like the way any of them looked. We'll maintain the profile number 2, but let's go ahead and delete this one. Let's get rid of that one, and that one. All right, so we're going to start off with a profile toolpath, cutting 1/8 of an inch deep. I'm going to go 0.125 inches deep with my 60-degree V-bit. And I'm going to be cutting on the line for this inside profile cut. Okay, let's reset and get rid of that monstrosity there. Okay. For the flowers and everything, that's going to be a V-carve toolpath. It will have a flat depth. I'm going to probably go 1/8 of an inch deep, 60-degree V-bit, and I don't know if it's worth my time to run in a flat area clearance tool, but if you got it, try it. So I'll go with an 1/8 inch flat area clearance tool. And so 60-degree V-bit, flat depth of 1/8 of an inch deep. We'll calculate that. And let's preview. Let's preview all the toolpaths. Okay, now I could see that as a chair back. Let's give it a little bit of color. Let's say that if this was cherry, hell, that would look nice as an inlay, a V-carve inlay. You know, like cherry and like a maple or something, really light contrasting, or even walnut. If my seats are going to be walnut, do a nice walnut inlay of that design. That'd be a nice chair back. I don't see anything there. I don't see anything wrong with that at all. Let's give this a Let's give this a kind of a dark brown color. Let's see if we can pull in a custom color, darken it up to, you know. So imagine a, you know, like a walnut inlay or something, you know, or stain, even a V-carve, you know, even painted or what have you. That wouldn't be a bad looking chair. I think that, or a back, you know, as far as a country style cottage type chair, maybe match that pattern on the sides and things for panel, you know, 1 and 2. Let's turn off panel 3. You know, maybe get rid of these two, or even keep these maybe on the back side. Because again, when you see this groove right here, this is on the inside, you know, this dado, it's not on the outside. So you got all of this area here as a canvas. So maybe you could match that pattern, that floral pattern on the sides here, you know, as well, you know, on the back side, and have the front open with these two holes, or, you know, whatever the case may be. I mean, you've got, you know, a nice pattern. So that actually wouldn't look too shabby. That actually wouldn't look too bad at all. Now, one of, you know, as a V-carve inlay and all. So the whole point of this exercise is you're going to have this template and all. You're going to have the toolpaths for the cutouts and all. But as far as customizing, go online, Google search, find something that really appeals to you. It could be, you know, if you're doing it for someone, it could be a, you know, their name on it, or it could be a school, you know, I don't know, you know, whatever it may be. But if I've got my kitchen style is kind of, you know, I live out in the Ocala National Forest, so my whole home is like a small cottage type style home, and very, you know, simple and plain. And my kitchen decor is kind of country themed. You know, and everything. So I could see something like this floral pattern on my chair if I had this in my home in some way. And the reason why, I don't know why I said the word kitchen, because I'd be using this to, you know, get up to the upper cabinets or something like that, and it would be a spare chair in my dining room or something with a pillow on it. I don't know, but I could see this type of pattern. But you can visualize, you know, everything. And how you would do. Now, if you're going to do a pattern, because this is generally set up as a one-sided design, you cut out the profile, you cut out the pocket cut and everything, and it's done, right? You know, you have your parts. That's if you're doing just a plain, and I'll have these vectors drawn in here in a moment, but that's if you're doing this plain cutout. It's a one-sided design. You're not flipping the board over, cutting any of that stuff. It's just cut it out, assemble it together, you're done. But if we're going to do some decoration on these side panels, these lower side panels, other than the top of the chair, because the top of the chair, that's still one side. But if I'm going to do some decorative carving on this, then I have to set this up as a two-sided job, because one side is going to have this pocket cut for the shelf, the step / shelf, whatever you want to call it. And then the other side is going to have the carving for if I'm going to do some type of 3D carving up the side and all. Now, if I'm cutting just a straight profile cut out all the way through on this part here, then it's a one-sided design, profile cut all the way through. But if I wanted to do something decorative on the sides, then it's a two-sided project. I'm cutting this out, doing my 3D carving, and then I'm going to flip it over and do my dado carving and what have you. So let's create the toolpaths on the actual project itself. Let's go ahead and we're going to select all of these. We'll start from scratch. Let's go ahead and get through this and delete all of the toolpaths. And let's start with panel 1. And let's go through. So on this, because I did import this in from SketchUp, there's some additional vectors here that are not needed. So I'm going to go ahead and select and delete them. That way I have, you know, the profile cuts and the cuts that I need. Now this vector here, I don't need that. Let's delete that. So I should have a nice single dotted line coming all the way around, and I don't. You can see there's some black behind that. So that's a vector that I don't need. I can go ahead and delete that. And that's just, when you import these files in from like SketchUp or something, and all, you have these extra vectors that you've got to create, because it's a 2D. We're looking at it in a 2D view, but it was a 3D part that was brought in. So here we've got this single line vector that we need to get rid of. I should have a nice clean rectangle. I've got a vector down here that I've got to get rid of. So I should have a nice clean vector. Now on this one, I do need to extend this part out past my profile cut line so that I get a nice clean pocket cut. And on the bottom side of this pocket, I either need to do one of two things. I either need to do my dog bone fillet, so I don't have to round off my shelves, my step boards, or I do a radius and then I round off my step boards. Either one. Me personally, I'm going to do a dog bone fillet. I will be cutting this out with a 1/4 inch end mill, so I'm going to throw in a couple of dog bone fillets there on that cut. That way I don't have to square off my step board. I can just cut it on a table saw. I can do a tilt my blade to 70 degrees or 20 degrees, however you want to look at it, and chop it off and cut it down and to its final size. And I will have a cut list. And by the way, speaking of cut list, guys, the cut list for the laptop holder and cabinet, that will be up on Facebook this evening. I did not get it up there the other day, but it will be posted up this evening. The cut list, for those of you that are waiting on the cut list on that cabinet with laptop holder and all, the cut list will be up. All right, so on this part here, I've got notice how my vector is nice and clean here, so there's nothing behind it, but it doesn't follow my profile all the way around. Now, first thing I need to do is join these vectors back together, because I cut them earlier when I was talking about this part. But notice on my profile here, it doesn't go all the way around, and I need to join it to this lower side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into node editing, and in node editing, I'm going to span between this node and this node down here, this long span right here, I'm going to delete it. Okay, that gives me an open vector on this bottom side. Now on my top side here, the span between this vector or this node and this node, I want to right click and delete that span as well. And also I want to, all the way around here, I'm going to go ahead and delete this span and that span and that span. And the reason why I'm deleting those spans is because I'm basically getting rid of those vectors. I need to keep this part, that part I need to keep, but so now I can do some joining. So if I select this vector here and this vector, I can join with a straight line, not once but twice, and that'll connect it together. And now I can get rid of the unnecessary vectors that I don't need. So let's select and let's see what we've got. So that's my profile. That's my rectangle. Might as well size that. We got to stretch that out a little bit. There we go. What vectors? I need this one stretched out. And I'm only stretching it out on on this one, both sides. Both sides. Backside too. That way my bet can go past the profile cut and give me a nice clean flat cut. Here I need my dog bone fillets. So I'm going to go here and here. There we go. And now I can get rid of the vectors that I don't need. And let's see here. That's basically that one. Delete that. So now I should have a nice clean dotted line coming all the way around. Nice closed vector all the way through. Same thing here and here. Now on these parts, they're a little bit too rigid for me. They're a little bit too square and stuff. And I want to kind of radius them off because my router bit's going to do that anyways when I'm profile cutting if I'm using this design. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the fillet tool, and I'm going to create a little bit bigger radius. I'm going to go with probably about a 1-inch radius. And I'm going to, oh, I still got the, let's normal fillet, a normal fillet. And let's back that off to half inch. Let's go half inch. Yeah, there we go. And I'm just going to round off these corners here. And stuff. Just to give it a nice little flow, because my router bit's going to radius out anyway. So I'm going to radius that up and stuff. And keep that pattern. So for the most part, the panel 1 is done. It's ready for profile and pocket cutting. So let's start off with the pocket toolpath, and we've got all the pockets are going to be using the same 1/4-inch end mill. So we're going to do all those together. So let's we're going to come. This pockets are only going to be a 1/4-inch deep, guys. 1/4-inch deep. And we're going to use our 1/4-inch end mill. We're going to, offset's fine for this, and this is going to be my panel 1. I'm going to throw in the word side 1 for right now, because just in case I want to do this as a 2-sided part, and I change my mind, I'm going to still create this as side 1. That way I don't have to rename my toolpaths and stuff if I do decide to make it a 2-sided part. And this is my pocket cuts with a 1/4-inch EM end mill. So, and I've gotten into the habit lately, reset this. I've gotten into the habit lately of naming the toolpaths here. That way we don't have to name them later when we're saving the files. Alright, so with that done, let's go ahead and create our profile cuts. Now before I create my profile cut, I'm going to lay this out as a single-sided project with these parts. So I want to add this design over on this part here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste. I can use the copy and paste tool here, and I can drag this over. Kind of get it in the general area that I want, and then I'm just going to flip it, not creating a mirror copy, but I'm just going to flip it vertically. There we go. And if I want to center it up, I can take and select my outside profile and go to my alignment tool, and up and down I can center that. Let's before we do that, let's group these two parts. There we go. Let's group those together. Now we can center it, because I want to keep them in the same orientation. But I can center those up, and I'm actually going to pull that up a little bit. It's going to be off center. I want to just eyeball that. That looks good. But I do need to change my rotation. I want to kind of make this a little bit parallel to the part. So let's pull that. There we go. All right. All right. So with that, I'll go ahead and select all of these, and the outside profiles. And this is going to be my profile toolpath. Cutting all the way through my material, 0.75 inches. And I'm going to use a 1/4-inch end mill. So 1 bit really is going to do all this, unless I'm doing, the decorative or the 3D or any of that stuff. I could literally take this and cut it out, cut up my shelves and all, and have this assembled literally in an hour. It's not going to take long at all, minus whatever run time it is to cut it. So we can calculate that. So if we preview those toolpaths, we'll see our, and I'm going to come back and put the tabs in here in just 2 seconds, but I wanted to show this without the tabs. So let's get rid of all of this scrap wood. Save some of it. You can use it for your splines or what have you, but this essentially would be our, our 2 parts that are, cut out. And so, our top and our bottom. Very simple project to lay out or to cut out. And of course, you can change anything. I'm going to give you the dimensions of these pieces. It's a 70-degree angle here, 10 3/4 inches wide by 16 inches, 10 3/4 inches tall, should I say, if I went up and down vertically here, by 16 inches. This one here, that same triangular part, is 15 1/4. There's a 3/4 inch difference because there's a step that goes down here by the same 10 3/4. And then from this flat to the top of this arch here is 17 1/2 inches. So knowing just those 3 dimensions and the angle, the 70-degree angle, you can create any style, folding chair, convertible chair that you want to. It could have all kinds of different styles. And if you're ever curious of all the different types of styles and stuff, just type in library chair or chair ladder, Google search chair ladder, and look at all the various designs and things. They get really, there's a lot of neat ones and stuff and things. So with those 2 parts, let's go back into that profile cut for a minute and let's add some tabs. I'm going to have my tabs 1/8 of an inch thick if this was a single-sided part. If it was a double-sided part, this number would be 1/16 of an inch. And the reason for that is I would have tabs on the other side, 1/16 of an inch, and when it's all said and done and cut out, I would have 1/8 of an inch tab to finish. I want my tabs to only be 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to add a couple of tabs in here on these inside pieces. They're pretty good size pieces, so I don't want them getting jammed up on the router bit. So I'm just going to throw a couple of tabs in there just to hold them steady. And then we'll throw 2 tabs here, 2 tabs here. On the back side, I'm only going to do 1 tab. Let me see where I want that. I'll do 1 tab over here and then 1 tab back here. Let's go with a cut there, a couple of tabs there, and maybe we'll throw 1. Alright, that's enough. Don't want to go tab crazy. Now, I want you to notice something on this back part here. From this bottom piece to here, that's that 15 1/4 inches. Notice that I have a subtle curve in there instead of a straight line. It could be a straight line, if I wanted it just to be a straight vertical line. But I have it curving because I have it coming out and kind of bulging out the back. So a very subtle curve, that nice transition to that back. And what that does is it gives the chair just that nice flowing curve along the back side of the chair. Let's get into a camera view, standard view from the front, so we can zoom in. You can see that nice, instead of just a straight, line up, a straight back, it's got a nice curve, and then it just kind of transitions. And all this is just a series of curves, arcs. Just a nice long arc here, a short arc here, and then a short arc here. And then kind of matching that on the other side. The width of this piece, the width of this piece at the wide parts is almost 2 inches wide. So it's a 2-inch wide side, and it should be the same even here, 2 1/8, so a little bit wider there. It could be the same thickness all the way up, but 2 1/8 to narrowing down. I want it tapering down, so at the very top I'm probably at about an inch, a little over 1.5 inches, so it's tapering in and then curving over and stuff. And so that same, you can see that, it's kind of tapering down and then it's curving around and stuff and all. But it's just a series of arcs if you were drawing this out. And all. So let's calculate this now. This is going to be panel 1, side 1, and this is my profile cut with a 1/4 inch end mill. Okay. Now I'm not going to go through and create all the toolpaths and everything. I mean I will for you to get the files to you guys, but you know how to. I think by this point, it's all going to be for panel 1, for panel 2, identical to a pocket toolpath and a profile toolpath. For panel 3, profile toolpaths only, unless you're doing something decorative like this V carving and all. But this is all profile cut. And these 3 parts here don't necessarily need to be cut on the CNC. I mean, they can. There's nothing wrong with it, but they're square cuts, other than the 20-degree angle cut on the end, of the 2 shelf boards. These are not the shelf boards. I'm sorry. These are the splines for the lower side of the the legs. Those are the splines, but it's just a 20-degree cut, or 70, however you want to look at it. And but those can be cut on the table saw. I mean, they're 3/4 inch wide. The length on this is from corner to the long point is 10.146. So basically, I think the other one should be a solid number. Let's see here. Let's grab a horizontal measurement from this point to this point, 9.873, and from this point to this point, 10.146. So about 10 1/8 by 9 7/8 with a 70-degree cut on it. So rough cut, and everything. And it all depends on how deep your pockets are and stuff on those side pieces that it fits into, your cut. You can make this an even 11 by 9 3/4, because when it gets glued in, it's going to get trimmed with a flush trim saw on the back and on the front, and that's it. Those splines. So you don't even have to cut the angle on it. You could just cut a square spline, put it in there, and then flush cut them when it's done. After it's glued up, I'll flush cut it, sand nice and flush, and with a saw, flush cut, the scrap off, the overhang, and then sand and glue it. So those parts, don't need to be cut. So panel 3, panel 4 is square cuts as well, again with an angle on them. And panel 5 is again a square cut. So literally, it's all profile cutting. If you are going to cut these out using the CNC because you don't have a hand saw or a skill saw or a jigsaw or a table saw or a miter saw, and you have to use your CNC for it, then a square cut, then it's just a profile cut, profile cut and stuff. So literally super simple project to cut out. The only hard part of it is the hinges, the cutting and kind of chiseling out, or using a handheld router, right? You could, and you could cut little mortises, little palm router if you had one, little hinge mortises, but you don't do those until you have the hinges. That way you can make the mortise match the hinge and everything. And by the way, also, who was it? Ronnie threw out that Lee Valley Tools also sells them. So if you're in the Canada area and stuff, or if you just want to order from Lee Valley Tools, because they have a lot of nice tools and stuff, they sell the concealed hinges as well. But they are typically, Lee Valley is based out of Ontario, Canada. So But anyways, you can still order in the U.S. They have, you're able to order in the U.S. Lee Valley is a nice place for tools and stuff as well. So Rockler, Woodcraft, Lee Valley, MLCS Woodworking, Eagle Woodworking, Eagle Lake, I think it's called, Woodworking. Places like that. They sell hinges. Hell, excuse my language, at your hardware store, your local True Values and stuff, they may have them. You can look at Lowe's and Home Depot in their hardware section and say, where they have all the hinges and stuff for cabinet doors and all. They might have them. I actually haven't sourced them over at Lowe's or Home Depot yet to see if they did. I'll let you know in Facebook group or something if they do. So what I wanted to show you was, let's say that you were drawing these parts out from scratch. You could, of course, you could use SketchUp if you had that type of program, or your CAD program, or what have you. But if you were drawing these out, basically, we're going to start with two rectangles. The rectangle sizes are, we have a 16-inch in width going along the x-axis by 10 3/4 inches in height along the y-axis. And then our other one is 15 1/4 by 10 3/4 inches in height. Okay, so I'm going to take and grab a guide ruler, and I'm going to snap to the back corner of this here. And on this back corner, I'm going to take and right click on this guide, and I'm going to tell it to create a relative parallel guide that is 4 1/4 inches, and it's going down. Down is negative on the y-axis, so negative 4.25, and I'm going to create a new guide there and everything. Okie dokie. And on that guide, I'm going to create another guide that is just from that guide, just about, I don't care, 1 inch away. Create a new guide, because I'm going to be moving that guide in a minute anyway. So this guide that I created, I'm going to right click and change the angle. So a new angle, I'm going to go 20 degrees and click apply. And oops, didn't want to do that. Bear with me a second. Let's delete one of those. Okay, and now I can come in here and I'm going to drag this guide. I'm going to drag this guide and snap it to this point. So those 2 points intersect, and I actually want to snap it over here. I want to move it over here. This guide, I want to move it over here, and I want them to intersect there. And so with that, now I can take a straight line and draw a straight line from here to here. And now I can get rid of that guide. I don't need it there anymore. Delete it. And I can take my trim tool and trim this lower part away here. And that should be good. Yeah, that's good for right now. All right, same thing. Now with this guide, I might as well use it while I have it here. I'm just going to take this guide and I'm going to change that to 20 degrees. Click apply. And I'm going to drag this guide and snap it right to the corner there on this vector over here and draw a straight line. And now I can get rid of that guide, get it out of my way. And again, with my trim tool, I can trim that. And so the distance from the bottom of this wider part here to my first shelf, if we were to look at panel 1, let's turn off the class panel for a minute. If we look at panel 1, the distance, if we were to measure, I don't know why I'm using the size tool. I want my measure tool. The horizontal distance from the bottom of the part to this is roughly about 8.5 inches. Okay, so 8.4, 8.5. Let's round up. Let me change this down to 2 decimal places, so it's not, I've got it set to 4. Let's measure that one more time with my new settings on my decimal points, because I don't want that confusing you guys. Okay, so a little under 8.5 inches, 8.48, 8.5. You can move it up. It's a step, however tall you want it to be. The measurement from the spline to the lower part, that rectangle, that's roughly 1.5 inches or 1.6. I'd probably be, if you're drawing this, I'd be a little bit specific with that one. I want good meat in between the lower part of that spline and whatever curve or whatever design I have down here. I don't want it to be real thin and fragile there. The whole purpose of the spline is to reinforce this whole area. Last thing I want to do is have a weak spot here, and so we want to be at least that distance away. So if we taking and knowing that, if we come in and this is my lower piece here, my 16-inch wide piece is my lower piece. So if I came in and snap a corner to this corner here, I can take this guide and I'm going to create a new relative guide, and we're going to the right, so it's a positive number. And I'm going to go 8.5 inches to create that guide there. And that's going to be where my step is. Now the step is only going 5.5 inches back into this. So when if I wanted to, I could, once again, I could take and use my guides to help me out. Let's go from here. Let's snap to that point and create a relative guide 5.5 inches away. 5.5. Create a guide there. And what that will do is that will give me the reference area for my 2 corners for my rectangle. And this rectangle is going to be 3/4 inches wide by 5.5 inches tall. And I want to snap it to that point. All right. So you can see here that we got to extend this out. If I was doing a pocket cut, create your dog bone fillets on the end. Of course, you come in with your dog bone fillets, your whatever bit you're using, to create those pocket cuts and all. And, leave this vector as it is, because that's going to be your pocket cut vector, and then this is going to be your profile cut. If I were, let's create our other rectangle on this one. I'll just go ahead and just draw a rectangle. And this rectangle is going to be 3/4 of an inch, 0.75 inches, 75 inches wide, and it only needs to be about 11 inches long. And here, if I want a specific measurement, I'm going to take this guide that I have running along that bottom line, and I'm going to create a relative guide going to the right, so it's a positive number. So 1 3/4, 1.66, whatever you want it to be. My drawing is 1.66, and that will tell me where this guy needs to go. And let's pull him back so he overlaps both sides. And let's get him on the guide. Zoom in there and let's drag him over on the guide. There we go. All right, now I can go ahead and delete these guides. Let's actually just do it the easy way. View, guidelines, delete all guides. There we go. And so essentially this is this part minus the 2 cutouts, or minus whatever we're going to do. If I was going to do that cutout, basically, whatever design floats your boat. In this case, it's pretty much a rectangle, and then on this, we would come into node editing and pull this point in to somewhere parallel, almost creating almost like a trapezoid in a sense. Not really, but. And then essentially this part here is if I hold down my control key while I'm in transform mode, I can drag that up. I can actually take my center line here and snap it to the center there, and then size it down, hold down my shift key and size it down, and then I can come down and position it, you know, wherever I want. Let's get rid of that one. I accidentally made a copy. You know, position it where I want, and then, you know, come in if I want to do some radiuses. My fillet tool, let's go with a 1/2 inch radius. Too many decimal points. And I could come in here and not fillets. Let's do a normal fillet, which is a radius. And I could come in here and kind of, you know, smooth this out, you know, to create that part. And literally, we've just, you know, aside from creating the bottom of this, remember I said I like to have 2 contact points. So from the back edge to the first contact point, this is going to be 2 1/4 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a rectangle, just to, you know, help me out here. So rectangle, and I'm going to go 2.5 on the height. It doesn't matter on the width because I'm not even going to use it for that. I'm just drawing a rectangle just to kind of see where it's at, where it falls. And that gives me a point here on my actual vector to where I can insert a node if I go into node editing. If it lets me go into node editing and insert a point right somewhere roughly right around there. And then I can take this rectangle grab it by this corner, kind of drag it down here, and again that just gives me somewhere on my profile cut a place to insert a point. And from there I can get rid of that. And now what I have, whether I use node editing, I have the area in here whether I want to just, you know, create some type of you know, curve, you know, of some sort for the, you know, the design itself. It gives me a point if I want to do arcs. So let's say if I do an arc from this point, you can see when you snap to a point, you see the cursor change to this little square with the kind of crosshair lines. And so I can go from there to my point here and create a nice arc, and then come down to this one. That's my center right there. Click, and I'm going to go to the center point there and pull this up. Not as much. And then while I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to move them up, leaving enough meat between the top of this arc and my spline, right? And then I'm going to take these two guys right here and I'm going to join them with a smooth curve to create that transition there. And then from there, I'm going to take and I can go into node editing. I can delete this span here. And while I'm in selection mode, I can take and join with a straight line once, join with a straight line twice, and I can create that lower profile. So very simple little layout that would match, like if we turn this off and we look at panel 1, if we look at the lower side of panel 1, you can see that kind of transition. And notice how this one is higher than this one, a little lower, just to give a little bit of design element. Now if we go back into that, that design could be whatever you wanted it to be, anything like that. Now, if you didn't want if you didn't want this to be so straight and rigid here, in node editing, you could smooth this line or turn it to a Bezier curve, so you can kind of create a little bit of a smooth curve or transition. If you're gonna do that, then let's take and pull this one back a little bit, and let's kind of create that transition to where it's not jagged right there. Let's come more out rounded so we get that round curve and everything, and you can create that nice little transition if you don't want it so straight line-ish. Right click and Bezier curve. Let's pull this one out and around so it's kind of in line with that arc, and then just bring this, kind of smooth it out there. Okay, create that nice little transition. So that's one option. Now on here, this is the upper part. Okay, this is the chair back, let's call it. And so the first thing I got to do to be able to get this to fit on the board is I need to mirror this. I got to flip it. So we're going to mirror this and not create a mirror copy. We're just going to flip it vertically. Okay, and rotate this just a little bit. Let's not rotate it yet. Let's leave it square. We'll get everything laid on in just a moment. But on this part, if we look at it in the sketch up here, that's the part we're drawing here. On this back side, is where we got to draw the back, the back, and that's 17.5 inches from here to the end of the back. So the first thing that I would do is I start off with a rectangle. I'm going to go with a rectangle that is, and it's going to cross over my vector here for a moment because we have to rotate it to fit and all, but it's going to be 17.5 by 2 inches. Okay, let's get these two parts to line up. Okay, and we can go ahead and do some trimming with our scissors. Let's get that line trimmed away. And now we can start to, creating this shape. So let's move this back a little bit. And I'm going to keep it straight for right now. I'm going to keep it straight as far as square, so that way I can create my curves and all. But on here, that 3/4 inch board, let's imagine that our seat back is here. This 3/4 inch seat is gonna go there. So starting at about 3/4 of an inch up from this corner, this right corner here, that's where I want to start kind of shaping the back of my chair. So what I want to do is I'm going to use the help of a guide. And I'm going to make a copy of that guide relative going to the left. It's a negative number. So we're going to go negative 0.75 inches away and create that new guide and everything. And from this point back is where I can start kind of shaping my chair. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a node or a point right on that section. All right. So now I wanted my back to kind of be narrow at the top. So what I did is I went into node editing, and let's get into node editing here. And the first thing I did is I, in a sense, kind of deleted this point, and it kind of creates this, it gets rid of that point, that corner and all. And that allows me to turn this to a Bezier curve, and now I can kind of start shaping my piece. Now the closer this anchor that I'm grabbing, this anchor here is, the closer that is to the node, the less the curve is. If I'm further away from it, you can see where my curve is, the peak of my curve on that that wave and everything. It's way out here. Well, I want it relatively close, because what I'm doing is I'm kind of focusing on creating that radius and everything, for my chair back. And however wide I want that radius to be, that's how I'm going to create that point. And I'm going to leave it square right here. We're going to smooth this out in a minute, but that starts to kind of create that shape. Now I want this about 1.5 inches wide at this upper part, and then transitioning down to 2 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a guide. I'm going to kind of snap to this point right here on the corner, and I'm going to create another guide relative to its position going up. That's a positive number, 1.5 inches. Okay. Which is up there. 1.5 inches is up there. Is that 1.5? It sure is. Let me measure my part. I think that's correct. Let me measure again. I believe it's 1.5. Tape measure somewhere here. 1 7/16. So close enough. 1 7/16, 1.5. It'll transition to that. So that's where I want. Go back into node editing, and that's where I want to pull my curve to. Bear with me a minute, I'm trying to round things off. Okay, and right about here I want to insert a point, and that way I can start to kind of pull this down, and I can start to focus on this now, my transition coming back. I wanted to kind of transition back a little bit there before it starts shaping. So now with that, this is 1.5 inches. My back in places are 2 inches wide, this and that. So I got to figure out where I want my curves. And so if I go into node editing here, from this point to right about, I'll pick a spot right about there. I want to insert a point, and right across from it on the back side I want to do the same thing. I want to insert a point, because when these curves occur, they're going to kind of occur together. And how I'm going to do that is let's get back into node editing. I don't know why I went out of it. Is I want to find get that there out of the way for a minute. Insert a midpoint. Just you do it easy that way, and then here insert a midpoint, and this midpoint's black. I want that to be a Bezier curve. I want to smooth that point and everything to create a Bezier curve with that. That way, when I'm selecting these anchors and stuff, anything that I do here is going to be copied at the bottom. So whatever I do up here is going to be kind of followed along on the bottom and everything. And so I want this to kind of just have a slight curve outward, very subtle curve outward. And then in here, I'm going to insert a midpoint between these two nodes and insert a midpoint between those two nodes back in the back. Insert midpoint. There we go. And I'm going to select these anchors. On this one, I want to delete this point right here, and I want it to transition nice and smooth into that. Same thing here. I'm going to delete this hard point here. Now that I have my midpoints in there, I'm going to delete that hard point because I want a nice smooth transition. See how it smoothed that out? So now I can grab these and I can start to kind of, pull back a little bit. And that actually, I don't want it to be too uncomfortable of a chair. I want it nice, curve and contour and everything. So that's good there. Now I'm off my board, but again, we got to still have to move this part on place and everything. The last thing is on this back part here, I'm not going to insert a midpoint. I'm just going to create an arc. I'm going to turn it to an arc. And I'm going to, not that dramatic of an arc, but a very subtle transition, nice curve in there. And that's going to create my seat piece. Now I can get rid of my guides. And these are the two main parts of the chair. Once you have these two parts drawn, you mirror and copy them for the other side, and then you create your shelf boards and your splines, which is all square. As far as the back, that could be any design you want. And I went with a very simple curve. We'll focus on that one in just a minute. But let's get out of node editing for a second. Let's get this part kind of, I'll rotate it in a second. But first, I need to get my step in here. My step. And the distance, if we come and look at panel 1, I'm going to cheat, for time's sake. And I look at panel 1. From where my seat is to the outside edge of this vector here, we're going to be roughly 6 3/4. Roughly 6 3/4. So let's go back to, and let's go ahead and create a guideline. Snap it to this point right here, and then we're going to make another guide relative to its position at 6 3/4, 6.75. It's going to the right, so it's a positive number. Okay. And then again, this is also going 5 1/4 inches or 5.5 inches into this cut, the length of that. So we'll have a rectangle here, and I'm just going to make that rectangle 5.5 by 3/4. Let's try that again. 5.5 by 3/4. There we go. And if I bring this corner right to here, that's going to be my step there. And of course, this part gets flush trim cut off, when the shelf is put in there. But for cutting the pocket, I want to leave that in there. As a matter of fact, I want to extend this out a little bit more so that router bit comes and cuts that pocket. But the actual shelf board would get flush trim cut to that. And so that's it for that part, other than doing, if we want to do these same designs over here, or if we want to do something decorative and all and do a two-sided part where it's a 3D cut on that side, however it may be. But in this case, I'll just copy and paste I'll bring this over to here. And what I'm going to do is mirror this. Just flip it vertically. Get it somewhere in line. Now, that looks good. On this one here, if I wanted to, I mean, don't have to, but if I wanted to, I could actually make that one a little bit longer. You know, whatever. Whatever floats your boat. I can make this one a little bit longer too. You know, and so basically that's our two parts. Now I can go ahead and you know, select this, group it together, and do some rotating to get it to fit on my 37 inch by 11 inch panel, you know, so I can cut those two parts out and everything of my, we'll group that together. That way I can cut those two parts out, and literally that's it. You draw those two parts and that's it. They're mirrored and copied for panel number 2. That's your two sides, and the rest of it is just the shelves, and then you've got the two additional parts that are not square cut. You know, pretty much are stretcher, 13 inches wide by, how tall am I? How tall am I? How tall am I? Vertical 2.5 inches, should be by 13. Oops, horizontal measurement from that corner to that corner there. Yep, 13. So 2.5 inch by 13, whatever design you want. I just went with a simple curved design. The back is a square panel. The square panel size is 13 inches in width. It is 13 inches because it's the same as the stretcher. By 7.5 inches tall. And then from there, you know, you can just, you know, create a couple of arcs, however you want to shape it out. You could leave it square. I like contact points versus, you know, trying to, because my back of my chair has a curve to it, right? So the back of the chair has a curve to it, and my square backer, you know, my square piece is straight. So I don't want that, you know, having, you know, a solid piece on those edges, on these edges here. I want a nice curve. I want some kind of opening or something there. So I have 4 contact points to work with. And that 3/4 inch board is centered. The center point of, you know, your 3/4 inch board is centered on the center point of the width of the you know, chair, you know, on both down the top and the bottom. It's centered. So if you got a little bit of a curve there, it'll be a little bit of a tilt, a lean back, and that's good and everything. But this design, heck, this back could have been much bigger. It could have come all the way down to here, to, you know, and there could have been some kind of really, you know, weave type carving where it almost looks like lattice work in the back or something. I mean, so many things that you can do with that. Whatever it may be. And then you know, you could have it squared off, rounded off, you could do whatever you want. But other than these two parts, which again, 13 by 2.5 could be just a square block, or it could have a decorative curve in it. The back, again, it's going to be 13 by what I say, 12.5. Did I get rid of the dimension? Whole vertical. 6.5. 13 by 6.5. You know, somewhere around there. At the actual curve, the height of the curve to the bottom is 7.5. So, you know, a 13 by 7.5 inch piece, and you use rectangle, and then you draw out the shape any way you want. You know what I mean? Just like we, you know, start off with a rectangle and then create it however you want. I will have all these dimensions on here for you guys in case you ever want to kind of, you know, create your own from scratch and do your own little custom design. Or you can use this template and work off of it and start altering its shape and things. Because you're going to have these vectors, you're going to have this, you know, complete to work off of. And then you can just start customizing, making some very cool chairs to sell. And these chairs, you know, they're fetching a pretty good penny online. If you ever look up computer chairs or library chairs and you look at the shopping, you know, part of it, you know, what they're selling for and stuff. If you're into selling your things and all, I mean, they're fetching a pretty good part, especially if you can customize them and things, you know, make them look nice. 1x12 material, what it could be pine, it could be, you know, what have you. In my case, I'm only going to build one of these for my home, so I'm going to do mine most likely out of walnut and mahogany, or maybe walnut and cherry, something, you know, those dark ambers, and also it matches my cabinets and my hardwood floors and stuff, you know, kind of matches my decor and everything. Let's stop here. It's 9:53. Making your toolpaths, they're all going to be profile cuts and pocket cuts unless you're doing a V carving, you know, like these flowers and stuff, or a profile cut with a V bit like this outer groove to create that nice little groove. All the rest of it is going to be profile cuts and pocket cuts. And also, now on the chair backs and everything, let me turn off some of these panels here. On the chair backs, where the chair back is going to go, you can go ahead and have your CNC pre-drill the holes, the 2 holes here. And even, you know, have it pre-drill the 2 holes here where you're going to drill into the shelf for reinforcement and all. And you can even have it countersink. You can use like a 1/8 inch or a 1/16 inch end mill or whatever for the pre-drilling of the hole, and then 1/4 inch end mill for the, you know, the countersink, and then you can, you know, as far as plugs, you can, you know, cut out some 1/4 inch dowel. You know, if you're doing this out of oak or something, 1/4 inch oak dowel, or you can just cut 1/4 inch little plugs out of you can have your CNC cut little plugs and all. Personally, me from Harbor Freight, I have a plug cutting set that has like a matching countersink, so I can countersink my holes. I'm gonna have the holes in here where where you would normally put the back. But it's going to be for my size back. If your back is longer or taller and it takes up the whole thing, then your holes are going to be in different place, 2 different places. But I'll have the holes in there. But I will have the CNC, you know, with an 1/8 inch bit or something, pre-drill those holes. But I will use my, you know, hand drill and my countersink bit, and then I will, out of some scrap wood, I'll use my plug cutting bits on my drill press or with my hand drill, whatever, and I'll cut a couple of plugs out of it, so it's matching the grain and stuff and all. And it has the plug cutting set has kind of like a taper to it of sorts and stuff. But you absolutely could do it on your CNC as well. It'd just be a 1/4 inch profile cut on a 1/4 inch circle. No, 1/4 inch diameter. And let's see here, control, double click on that, control, drag a copy down, and then take and offset this one inward 1/8 of an inch. Oops, 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so I'd have my 1/8 inch pre-drill hole here, and that should be 1/8 of an inch if I did my math right. Let's look at the size. Yep, 1/8 of an inch. All right, so I'd have my, you know, pre-drill hole going through my drilling, and then this 1/4 inch would be, you know, cutting down maybe a 1/4 inch deep or something. It'd be my countersink, and then this somewhere in a scrap piece of wood, I'd have a profile cut, you know, cutting out, you know, that little dowel stick out of a, you know, a piece of this. But I would not cut all the way through. I'd only have it cutting, profile cut on the outside of this 3/8 of an inch deep. That's it, 3/8 of an inch deep, or 1/4 of an inch, well, a little 3/8. And then after it's cut out and all, you take a screwdriver and you stick in there and you pop and you break this out, that plug. Because when that plug gets stuck in here, you're going to be flush cutting it off anyway. So that broken little fibers on the bottom side of this isn't going to matter none whatsoever. But you don't try to cut this 1/4 inch profile cut all the way through that 3/4 inch piece of material. Ridiculous. 3/8 of an inch, and then use a screwdriver to break the plug out of there. And you can create a series of plugs, in different places, and anywhere there's scrap wood that's going to get wasted or whatever, you can create a series of plugs and have your, space them apart properly so that a router bit can go around and they're not all just going to fall out and fly everywhere. But you can create a series of plugs that you can cut out for all your parts and stuff. However you want to do it, you can create that. So let's come in and ask some questions. What's at 9:58? So we're going to wrap up here. So let's look at what all people had to say here while I was talking. Larry helped me out with maybe joining at the top to create kind of like that arrowhead design on that one pattern, but I honestly didn't like the pattern. I didn't think it looked good. But there's, you ever seen those chairs where the backs are cut out? There's some kind of profile cut in the back of the chair, whether it's a weave pattern or something, it looks good. Find a pattern that looks good. That one didn't, but thank you, Larry, for that. Ronnie says, what happens if you rotate it so it is horizontal? What happens if you rotate it so it is horizontal? And then looks very great. So Ronnie, help me out here. Which part, chair back or ladder bottom, however you want to call it, that's these two parts. Which one were you saying, what would happen if I rotate horizontal? Which piece, which part? When I know I rotated this part to fit on the board, but what was it you were asking if I were, what would happen if I rotated horizontally? Let me know. And oh, by the way, guys and girls, notice something. I made a little boo-boo here. Notice that this step is at an angle, right? It's kind of imagine this being a step, and it's kind of ramping back, right? It's kind of ramping back. That was the flower pattern on the back of the chair. Okay, Ronnie was talking about the flower pattern on the back of the chair. We're going to come back to that rotating part there for a moment, but he was referencing this. What would look like if we rotated it, horizontally? It would still look good. We'd have to size it down a little bit for that part, but we could take this and we could rotate it horizontally, and it could be the pattern that's on the side of the legs, on the ladder sides and things. For the chair back, unless you had a wider chair back, and all. But yeah, you could absolutely rotate it. It would still look good. It's a nice looking pattern. That's why I mirrored it and all. So, good call on that. But let's pop back over here for a moment and let's talk about this. This rectangle at all, I pulled this rectangle here, but you see how it's kind of, if this were a step, imagine, I can't rotate it. I can actually. Let's rotate this whole thing 90 degrees. 90. There we go. And let's freehand rotate this off of this corner pivot point. By the way, guys, this is a pivot point here. When you are rotating apart, this is a pivot point. These two circles, not those two circles. Where'd my pivot point go? So bear with me a second. Where's my pivot point? My pivot point. There we go. It looked just like my countersink and everything, but this is my pivot point here. We can move that to anywhere you want. And so when you rotate, now you're pivoting off of that pivot point and all. So I'm actually going to square this up. A little more. Okay. So imagine if this were a step and everything. It's got a little bit of a back lean to it, and this part here needs to be vertical. It needs to be square. So let's redraw that rectangle, and I'm going to use this as my corner point here. Actually, I'm going to use this bottom one, and I'm going to redraw this rectangle, and then I'm going to delete this crooked one. Oh, not that one. I got to ungroup it first. I'm going to delete this crooked one because when I pulled it off of when I pulled that guide off of here, that guide was angled to the same angle that this is and everything, and so it made my step crooked. So be mindful. Basically, what you should have is from this leg here, from this front to this, that should be 70 degrees. And if I were to take and measure an angle, so if my angle dimension, if I come to the corner here and measure from this point, come around and measure to this point, I should be at, why does it do that to me? We got to go backwards. 109. Let's go on the inside. That's why. Inside. Lower part. Not the upper part. I went up 2 since that should have went acute. Okay, so from here to here to here. Okay. So 70 degrees. It should be 70 degrees. Not 70.7, but 70 degrees. That rectangle should be from that front point. And everything, so you want to, and I would actually adjust that 0.7. Let's see, 0.7. If I rotated this off of the lower right corner, 0.7 degrees. And I measured that again. I should be now pretty much squared up. And the reason why it was off is because this is off down here by that set 0.7 degrees. Because if it was flat, then it would be flat. But let's go in here and from this intersection, come out and just grab a point from here, and we should be at roughly 70 degrees. Okay. So it should be that step on any of these parts, even this one here, should be 70 degrees. Okay, on the acute side, 70 degrees from this front point. Okay, just remember that, and I'll have these in here and all as well. I'll have the drawings. You're gonna have everything that you need. Where did I get the flower pattern? I pulled it off of Google search for ornate design vectors, but I will provide that flower pattern for you guys, Ronnie. Sorry, Ronnie. I'll provide that in the files that I put on Facebook. I'll provide that in the vector. I'll provide it as a DXF, and I'll provide it in this VCarve file too for you guys and girls that only have 8.5 or something. I'll pull that. Greg, Greg said, hi, finally made it and unpacked. So I'm glad you're getting set up, Greg, on your move. I'm glad you're able to sit in on this and stuff. So any questions on this this particular type chair? And basically, guys, to be honest with you, if you were carving a chair, like just a stool, that didn't have this transition and things, it's pretty much the same process, right? If you were going to let me group this back together real quick, and if you were going to cut out like some chair sides and all, and just have a a CNC chair that bear with me a second. Let me get my parts grouped together here. Group. Rotate. But anyway, if you were, it's same process. If you were going to make any kind of chair, sorry I got quiet on you. I was just moving that down. You definitely want, we'll have the CNC holes for the pre-drill of the holes in the different locations. I'll have them drawn in here in the design for you. But again, be sure to change those on this back if you're going to be doing a longer back or a wider back. As far as height wise, your holes might be down here and up here instead of up here and here. 6 inches apart. They could be 12 or 14 or whatever, wherever you're going to do. And yes, Ron, the step was still sloping because it's not parallel to the base and everything. So you would have that. So what Ron's saying is this step and this base, let's draw a circle around it. This base down here, they're going to be parallel to each other because this is going to be sitting flat on the floor. This base is going to have a 3/4 inch board, for that upper step. It's going to have a 3/4 inch board. Let me rotate that board a little bit. And so this board is going to be sitting flat on the floor, and this will better illustrate it here. Let me turn this around. It's flat on the floor, and our step, see if I can hide this. Hide that one, hide that one. Our step, that groove, that groove here should be parallel to the bottom, which is, of course, then parallel to the floor, because it's sitting on the floor. So that's what Ron Galileo was pointing out. So thank you, Ron, for that. And this angle here, if I son of a gun, hold on a second, let me get this angle here. If I grab my protractor and I click on this point and come from here to here as a point, if I can snap to it, oops, I don't know if you guys saw that. Look down if you can see at the bottom of the screen where it says angle. It's going to show up there. It's not going to show any numbers or anything on the screen here. But this point, if I came in and snapped to there, 70 degrees, 69.9. It's 70, but I'm not right on my line. I'm off my line. You can see where I'm at. But it's 70 degrees. That angle, and that should make that slot parallel to the bottom of the base, which is what it sits on when it's sitting on the floor. Okay, all right, 70 degrees. So a 20-degree slant on these angles here, or 70, right, 20 or 70, the same thing. And then our grooves are 70 degrees from that front slant to make it parallel. That way it's square to the floor. Square to the floor, the foundation and everything. Okay. All right. And also 70 degrees. But so yeah, if you were drawing these out, you would start off with a rectangle and you would create the parts just like we did here. But in this case, I'm actually going to provide this file for you and all the vectors and stuff, so you can kind of actually work off of it and you can just kind of customize things. The only things that wouldn't change are the step locations, and I would say keep the spline, the support spline down here, this part down here. Keep that support spline and all, and that location. But as far as the decorative design, this curve at the bottom, these rectangles in here, you can change them up any way you want. Hell, you don't have to cut it through. You could flip this over and do some kind of really awesome ornate carving on the backside. And imagine if if we look at this, if I unhide all the parts, if I came in, and let me come into this and let me delete this and delete that. That's going to kind of, close off. I'm going to leave those vectors in there. But now if I do that, now I've got this whole canvas right here. This whole canvas right here. That part of my design could be 3D cut on this part and the other part over here. And but when the chair is in the chair mode, it creates this really ornate carving, to really decorate this throne type chair. And hell, if I was creative enough when I flip this upright, that somehow or another the design kind of flows in the other direction as well. But I really wouldn't focus on that. But I could, I would do some type of really nice ornate carving all the way into here. And something, if I was going to do a 3D, it would be a full panel instead of 2 individual panels. It'd be 2 individual designs, but when this is closed up, it's one whole design. It matches and stuff. So, however you wanted to, lay that out, you could. You could really, do some nice work and all. And go from there. So however you wanted to however you wanted to lay it out, you're going to have the template. You're going to have the template for this and I'll have key elements in there, measurements and stuff, and then it's up to you to kind of work with it. And you'll have the vectors in case you guys don't have VCarve 9 desktop or Pro. If you only have 8 or 8.5, I'll have the vectors for you, so you can import these vectors from all the panels. You can import them into your design and everything. So but again, really, you're only for me, I'd be cutting out the 2 sides, the top, back piece and the little cross beam, and then my shelves and all that stuff or steps, they'd be cut on the table saw or the miter saw or what have you. I wouldn't bother with cutting them on the CNC. I'd just cut them on the table saw and stuff. But any questions on this design? Any questions on anything in general? Doesn't even have to be related to this. We're going to go 5 minutes of questions, guys. So if you have any, ask them now. If not, we're going to call it a good day here in about 5 minutes. So, all right. I'll start talking again, so we're not sitting there listening to dead air while if you guys are typing in questions and all. But I will next week, Monday. You guys have put out a whole list of recommended projects and stuff. I think we're going to look at doing some I don't know. Let's look at simple V-carve or 3D carving and stuff in cast acrylic, so we can cover creating toolpaths or designs for cast acrylic for edge-lit LED signs or profile cuts or whatever. We'll do cast acrylic project next week, and then the week after that we'll create a design. We'll do some laser. The following Monday we'll do for those of you that have the digital laser, we'll do some designs and all for some nice laser engraving and things in different materials and stuff. So that'll be the next 2 classes coming up. We're going to have carving in cast acrylic, whether it be V-carve or simple carves or 3D carving in cast acrylic. We will have that. We'll do that this coming Monday, and then the following Monday after that we'll do some laser engraving. We'll create some nice patterns. I'll have some nice designs ready to go for you guys to do some laser engraving. So I really would love to see, because I'm going to make one of these. Now, I didn't, I was supposed to make my cabinet and laptop stand this weekend, and I got the material, but I didn't get a chance to actually cut it out and put it together. So what I'm going to do is try to squeeze in between any off time that I have off the phone and stuff. I'm going to squeeze in and try to get that made, because the whole purpose of me making it is I want to try to figure out the best way or a really nice way to mount it, because we talked about making the cabinet and all, but we really didn't go into mounting it, a good way to secure it or mount it to the stand. And I wanted to have mine made so I could say, okay, now how am I going to mount it, so that way I could tell you guys, hey, here's a nice little way to mount it, right? So hopefully you guys make that that project, or at least an aspect of it. But on this one, one of our popular designs before this was the little kids rocking chair, the little puzzle key chair, and a lot of you guys made that. I think it would be cool to see some of these, some different variations of these library ladders and all, and everything. Now, be sure that I'm going to have the measurements and stuff, and these measurements, they're not just willy-nilly picked out of the air. These measurements are to kind of provide a stable foundation for when this is in ladder mode, or a nice chair foundation and width and stuff. So make sure you make this, and if you're going to sell it, I'll test it, and make sure that they absolutely understand that this very top step that's at the top of the, when it's in chair mode, is not a step. That the maximum they want to go is, to this step here. But this is not a step. Or I would highly, recommend they use the, this area is the step, the highest they go, and they use that to hold their paint buckets or whatever the case may be. But I'd love to see some variations of this. I will provide the SketchUp model for it as well. For those of you that have downloaded SketchUp from last week's class and wanted to kind of play around with it, I will provide the SketchUp model for this as well. I'll provide a couple of links to the concealed hinges. But Rockler, Woodcraft, no, it's a concealed hinge. Your boards are 3/4 of an inch thick, right? So these hinges have to fit, the mortises have to fit within a 3/4 inch material. So it'll actually say there on the page, recommended for 3/4 inch material or larger, recommended for 1/2 inch material or smaller, tight things and all. We want 3/4 inch or larger material for our concealed hinges. You want 2 sets of, a set of hinges, or you could use the piano hinge. I just don't like it because it leaves kind of that lip up and all and stuff. But give that a try. I'd love to see some of these made by you guys. I'm gonna make one too, and I'll be sure to share my pictures and stuff. But yeah, Ronnie, before I build the ladder chair, I'm gonna build the the cabinet and all, because I want to be able to provide a tool holder. I promised you guys that I'd create the little vectors and a little design for a tool holder and all, but I want to do a couple of testing and all to see what and to create a really decent, useful tool holder, and how we can associate that tool holder with our tool database. Because in our tool database, when we are looking at a tool, we have the option to assign that tool a tool number, down here. And I want that tool number to be associated with the tool holder, and this bit that's in tool holder number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is associated with this bit, so that way you can just grab it right out of your tool holder. You don't have to sit there and squint your eyes and say, okay, what size is that bit? What tool number is that? It's going to be V-carved right into the tool holder. And so I will, I'll be providing that file, but I haven't made it yet. And I'd like to be able to make it to make sure that it's going to hold all kind of variety of bits, whether we're using, big 1.25" face planing bits or, round overs and things. I want a variety of bits along with our V bits and our end mills and things like that, ball noses and stuff. But I want some profile bits to be able to fit in there as well and everything. So I want this tool holder to come out, decent. And then, of course, you guys can customize it however you want. So I'm hoping to get to that. I'll get on that and I'll get that file over to you. But this file, I'll post these files over the next tonight or tomorrow. The cut list, at least for that cabinet and tool holder, that will be posted later this evening. And that's it. That's it, guys. That's it for the. And sorry, I'm now. There's going to be some buffering, so we're going to go ahead and call it a night. I'm buffering really bad. Let's go ahead and save those changes. All right. Let's see if I can stop buffering. All right. Guys, I'm buffering, so you might not get this last part, but I'm going to call it good night. And we'll end it here. All right. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.